There's just so many fiat-based crimes. When you look at why people are in prison, a lot of it was money motivated. So I started to think like there has to be a bigger reason here. So I read a ton of books in prison. And the one that stuck out to me the most was what was it called? The Lords of Easy Money. In the book, The Lords of Easy Money, it talks about all of the loans that the US provided during COVID and how the United States government basically came up with the money for those loans. And it specifically talked about the Main Street lending loan and how that loan was just printed money. The Federal Reserve just printed it. And I'm sitting in prison, a Bitcoiner at this point, like a hardcore Bitcoiner, like I'm never using the banks again because I'm in prison. And I'm reading all these books where it's like, you got duped, the government is printing money, causing inflation, causing prices to go up, and we're having to take out loans. This is a debt cycle. Like when you have debt, you are in prison to those banks. The way America has groomed us to believe that debt is normal, that we should buy a car with debt, we should put everything on our credit card, is not normal.
Hello guys, we're back. So we're in the middle of the conference, the Bitcoin conference here in Barcelona. I hope that you enjoyed the episode with Ian. We're continuing now with more interviews. Of course, we're also broadcasting a lot of what's going on here at the conference. I want to shout out to my partners, Bitcoin Conference, the Bitcoin Film Fund Conference. They're helping a lot. I hope that you're enjoying the interviews that we're doing. It's really fun. And of course, a couple of weeks ago, they did their own conference in Warsaw. I hope that you have enjoyed that. What else? It's been an exciting month. We also had Lawrence Lepard in the previous episode before. Ian, I hope that you enjoyed it. He just launched Big Print. I know that I have been mentioning him a lot. This is not a paid partnership or sponsorship at all, but the book is great. It's actually great, and he has been a great guest. Probably will do a second part in the future. So it's a great book. Also, I want to mention about the Satoshi Papers that now it's out. Natalie Smolensky have been working a lot with this. So this is another great book that you should read. But yeah, exciting things happening. I don't want to keep talking because there's a great interview that's coming next that you will enjoy. This episode is about second chances, and it's a very powerful story. So anyways, let's start. I just want to welcome Jill Ford to Bitcoin Podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really passionate about second chances, especially with all that I've been through. So I'm really excited to share my story.
Absolutely. So I don't even know where to start. Probably, as I always do in the podcast, let's start right there. If you can share a little bit about your background, then eventually, guys, you will understand why this is a powerful story.
Let me start from the beginning. Well, I have been a business owner since I could walk, really, and that's very true. I started my e-commerce journey when I was about 8 years old. I started listing things on eBay for my mom, just as a side hustle. Well, I would, go to elementary school, middle school, and then I would come home and I would be answering questions and listing products. Wow. So it was an escape for me. I grew up in a very abusive household and just went through a lot of trauma as a young child. So that really motivated me to hustle and to move out of my parents' house as quickly as I possibly could because of the abuse that went on in the household. So I moved out a month after I turned 18 and I went to college for fashion retail merchandising and ultimately met my husband in college. My first year, I got married when I was 19. Wow. So yeah, I got married when I was 19. Isn't that crazy? We fast forward to, let's say, when I had my first child, which was in 2014, I decided to start my own company called Oliver and Olivia Apparel. I was making baby clothes, baby accessories. My ultimate goal was just to be a stay-at-home mom, but I got really bored, which is really odd to have a newborn and get really bored, but I did. It eventually just grew and grew and grew. And I had like a team of high schoolers in my house. We turned the game room into like a little factory. And from 2014 to 2021, we were in a 15,000 square foot warehouse.
Hmm.
So my little side hustle, wannabe stay-at-home mom, had turned into this massive screen printing and embroidery business. And while it was really beautiful and awesome that it grew, and I thank God that it grew into that size, there was a lot of downsides of being a business owner. And one of those is money and cash flow. And honestly, I'm a grower. I'm a visionary. I like to grow. I like to, but I'm not your financial savvy girl. Still, I have a CPA because he keeps me in line. You know what I mean? But like, it
Yeah.
wasn't really, my passion was growing. And so, it got to the point with Oliver and Olivia Apparel that we were taking out a lot of loans, and I didn't understand money or fiat or loans or interest rates. Even though my dad was a CPA, I did grow up in a very abusive household, so I didn't really look at him as an example to guide me.
Okay.
As much as I love him, when you experience abuse from someone that, even if he was very knowledgeable, it was hard to trust his
Yeah.
decisions after what I had been through. And so, as a woman in a business taking loans, even in COVID, like, we were really busy, but I was taking loans to pay off payday loans because I got high interest payday loans. And it was honestly like, we have this phrase like robbing Peter to pay Paul. That's really what it was, because I wasn't keeping track of my inventory costs and my cost of goods sold and labor and all of this. But I had grown, and I have 50 employees.
And during
I was
COVID.
also during COVID, and at that point, I just wasn't making the wisest decisions, and my head just wasn't screwed on straight. So, because I was really overwhelmed. And at that time, my son was diagnosed with autism. We were building a house. We started building that house before COVID, but it's a lot of work to build a house and try to manage that along with everything that was going on with the business. Ultimately, short story, not, I mean, make a long story short, I took out different COVID loans at the time.
Oh, okay.
We needed them because we had high interest payday loans that we needed to pay off. Like, I didn't understand money, so I was just financing everything. I was paying nothing in cash.
Okay.
So it was like, always like, I've got to sell something to make payroll, but we're doing so well in sales. Well, the missing piece was I didn't know how much I was making per item. So honestly, I was losing money. Every month I was losing
Hmm.
money, and I was taking out loans. Well, and I was also like living a very lavish lifestyle. So, there's a lot of spiritual power behind money. And they say that, what's that phrase? I mean, money will leave you basically if you don't pay attention to it. And I really wasn't, I was just flying by the seat of my pants, honestly, when it came to things, and wasn't making the right decisions.
Okay.
And I misspent a loan called the Main Street Lending Loan, which is a COVID loan. There were multiple loans in the United States that were offered. There was the EIDL loan through the SBA administration. There was the PPP loan, which is the Paycheck Protection Program. And then there's
Okay.
the Main Street Lending Program. The Main Street Lending Program was not a popular loan. I think only about 6,000 businesses in America actually qualified for it. There was really strict
Very few.
qualifications. Yeah, there were very strict qualifications in order to even get the loan. And I personally believe that I got the loan because the banker really wanted to make that it was I was the first recipient of the loan at this bank, and they really wanted to try it on someone, and not very many businesses qualified. It was just a hard loan to qualify for. And it wasn't necessarily that they looked at your creditor. I mean, they did, but it was like there was just so many stipulations.
Hmm.
And it was funded by the Federal Reserve.
Oh,
10% was funded by the bank. So the bank put down 10%. So if I got a $400,000 loan. The bank had $40,000 risk in it. And then the Federal
okay.
Reserve carried the rest. Well, that particular loan had different guidelines than the PPP loan or the EIDL loan. You could use that to grow your business. I mean, there
Hmm.
was just a laundry list of things that you could do with that loan. And I very much misunderstood it. But I knew one thing, and that's if I didn't get this loan, then I'd probably have to take out another, payday loan. Well, for small businesses, like, it's not really called a payday loan. It's like a really high interest loan. When I say high interest, it's like 18%, and you have to pay
Wow.
it back with your daily sales. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's a
Yeah,
lot
it's
of
a lot.
pressure. So all I
Hmm.
knew was if I didn't take out this, Main Street lending loan, then I would be having to take out another one of these loans where money was coming out of my daily sales, and then I wouldn't have enough money for inventory. And this cycle repeated itself. And so when I got this loan, it was a big relief. It was a big help because I didn't have to take out a payday loan. And the thing about it is I was also building a house at the time. And
Mm-hmm.
as a small business owner, to even qualify for a house, I was taking out a private mortgage. And those had different sets of qualifications, and it was 20% down. So I had been trying to save my 20% down for years. I mean, the whole year that we were building, we started building before COVID in 2019.
Okay.
I had been trying to save, and I just kept having to put money back in the business because it was just a debt cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, the long story short, I did use a Main Street lending loan for the down payment on my house. And that is why I went to prison. I ultimately I misspent it, and I honestly was so busy at the time, I didn't realize it because I had all the money like commingled. So, and you could pay your employees with the Main Street lending loan, but something I just didn't read enough into was that you had to actually, you guaranteed that you wouldn't pay yourself. So,
Mm-hmm.
as a small business owner in America, like we don't get any education before signing these loan documents, and we can't afford to hire attorneys to be able
Mm-hmm.
to look over the loan documents. So we're really put in this like fiat jail. And it's really easy to go to prison here over white collar crimes that you didn't truly intend on committing. I took an owner's draw out of my account and ultimately used those funds, to put a down payment on my house. And um, the business ended up going out of business in
Yeah.
March of 2021 because, like I said, we were in that debt cycle. Like we were
Mm-hmm.
losing money on every purchase. So eventually, it just caught up to us. And there was, I wasn't doing a great job managing the employees, and my mental health wasn't good. And so ultimately, it all just came crashing down. And I had $10,000 left in my bank account, and I could either file bankruptcy or I could pay my employees. I
Mm-hmm.
ended up filing bankruptcy, and it was the biggest mistake I ever made
Mm-hmm.
because I should have taken that money and paid my employees. I should have sold things around my house and paid my employees
Mm-hmm.
because, they live paycheck to paycheck and they needed those funds. Like I could have figured out, like surely I had enough Louis Vuittons I could have sold to make buy for my family. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, it was
Yeah.
very, very wrong of me to I was more worried about just getting out of this cycle that I was in. And ultimately the bankruptcy got dismissed.
Yeah.
So it didn't even go through. Like it didn't get discharged. So my debt still stayed with me. So I should have
Okay.
just not even filed.
And
There's
what
lots of different.
I have a question about that. What are the implications when you declare bankruptcy?
Well,
What
when
will be
you
the
declare
Mhm.
yeah, when you declare bankruptcy, you have to go to a meeting of the creditors. Oh Lord, that was the most intimidating thing ever. So I go in, and most of the time, your creditors, like when you're filing bankruptcy, they usually don't show up. It's
Okay.
all of mine did, and I had employees
Really?
show up, and I had employees show up
Mm-hmm.
because you see, my employees didn't receive their last paycheck because I had chosen to file bankruptcy and try to just get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But that is not the way anyone should do that. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like, so my employees had called the news station and reported me, and they did like this in your corner news story.
Mm-hmm.
And the news station came to my house and tried to interview me.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I was just really in a bad, bad place. I told the news station, I said, because at that point I was like, I'll just start another business. I'll just keep going. I'll just do it out of my house again.
You
I
didn't
was just trying to
realize the
survive.
implication that you probably will go to jail or something back then.
Yeah, no, not at all. And I told them, I said, I literally said this on the news. If Donald Trump can close and file bankruptcy on one business and open another, so can I. I was like, that's probably not something you should say, Jill.
Oh shit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now I'm like kind of like embracing my stupidity.
Well,
But
yeah.
I think we all, like, I can laugh at myself, at this point. Like, I've been through so much that it's like, wow, yes, you can do that. That doesn't mean that it's right or it's morally right
Yeah.
or that it looks good on you. So, I've learned a lot and I've came a long way. Honestly, you probably wonder, like, how did she even get into Bitcoin? Well, it found me. A Christian, and I believe in God, and I believe that He puts things in your path
Yeah.
to strengthen you, to better you, to make you a better person. I feel like the whole downfall of my business was to show me what I needed to change about myself, because ultimately he gives and he takes away, and he took away, and I was really mad at God. Like, I was ripping up the Bible and mad, like, because I had prayed over this business day in, day out. I prayed over the house that I built, and now it's all being taken away. Like, who are you? Are you even there, God? Are you even real? Like, what is this? Am I, so I had a lot of feelings going through that. But looking back at it now, I know that he had a huge plan, because while I was going through the bankruptcy system, I had to get a job. And I applied for a LinkedIn job, and I
Mm-hmm.
knew one thing that I was really good at, and that was creating websites, building businesses,
Mm-hmm.
and growing, and e-commerce marketing. It was my niche. I had done
Mm-hmm.
a lot of sales on Amazon and Etsy, and I built my own Shopify website, so I knew how to do it. But I wanted, during COVID, a lot of companies weren't online yet, or if they were, they weren't like the online shopping just wasn't what it is today,
Yeah.
because COVID forced us to buy a lot online. And now that's just normal. Like, I can go online and buy such and such. But small businesses really weren't online. So that was what my plan was. So
Mm-hmm.
I found a LinkedIn ad. I didn't quite understand it, but ultimately this lady was trying to build an app for influencers, and she wanted
Okay.
to reward people with coins.
Right.
Now, her background is that she was from China, and she had been mining, and we were like mid 2021. So we were in the bull market at that point, right? So
Yeah.
that project quickly ended because she had a demand from her family and friends to help them buy Bitcoin miners, because we were almost at the peak of the bull market. So it's a little late to be buying miners, but
Yeah.
she wanted to start selling them, and she wanted to be the first woman owned Bitcoin mining company. She let everybody else in the company go except me. And I had no
Mm-hmm.
idea what Bitcoin was, other than I heard on the radio that a guy bought pizza with it and now lost a lot of money. And I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe I should look at that on Robinhood or whatever. I don't know. I was just like, you know,
Yeah.
at that point I had only ever downloaded the app Robinhood, and that was for different things back. You know what I mean? So I
Just for a quick context, guy, Robinhood is an app that I think it's for investment in the US, right? Because we don't have it in Europe. And
yes, it's investment in the US, and they didn't even have Bitcoin on their app in 2021. It
Mhm.
was just more like stocks. So if at that
Okay.
point, if I thought that I needed to buy Bitcoin, I would have gone to Robinhood.
Okay.
So, I just didn't know
Mhm.
anything about crypto. I didn't know anything about Bitcoin. So she sent me a PDF on all about Bitcoin mining. She sent me some
Mhm.
material to read about how to create your wallet, and she mailed me an S9 and told me to plug it in my house and start mining with it. So what did I
Wow.
do? I learned how to plug that S9 in. Um, the picture of it on my LinkedIn right now. I put a towel down, I put the miner on it, and I put it on my dresser, because I thought, well, it's going to damage my dresser. I didn't know anything that it would get hot, or it was loud, or whatever,
Yeah. Or the noise.
or the noise. Yeah, so I plugged it in, I found my IP address, I was like, what is a pool? She said, at first she said to go with ant pool, so we went with ant pool, and I learned all
Uh-huh.
about that. I ended up writing some how-to guides on how to set up your pool, how to, find your IP address, all these things, because she
Mhm.
wanted to market her services to people that were brand new into the mining space.
Mhm.
And from there, she pushed me to go to different local meetups in Texas, because I had moved from Oklahoma to Texas. We sold our house and we
Mhm.
moved into an apartment with our
All
three
right.
kids. It was crammed. But we made it work. So I started going to different events. I went to the Texas blockchain events. We set up our own event. We just did the local meetup thing, and it was really awesome. And my first conference I went to was Bitcoin 2022. That's when it resonated with me that, like, I was in the right place and I was meant to be here, because their second chances are strongly um, embraced in the Bitcoin community, and I just felt at home. So I mean, did you have a question?
It was before you going to jail, right?
It was before I went to
Or
prison. It was before I
oh
even knew
wow.
about Bitcoin.
Wow, wow, wow. Uh-huh. All
Yes,
right.
I
So
found out
yes.
about Bitcoin in 2021. when I
Mhm.
applied for a job on LinkedIn. And it
Uh-huh.
wasn't even a Bitcoin project, but it turned into a Bitcoin project because she switched gears and was like, "Hey, I want to sell miners to all my friends and family, and I need your help." And I was like, "Well, I have no idea. I'm not even in tech. I'm in fashion. Like I've always just, done that." But I was like, "You know what? I'm down for anything." And I started learning about Bitcoin,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Wow, this is insane. This is awesome."
And when you went to the Bitcoin conference, what was the because you said that you felt that you were in the right place. So probably that was
Yeah,
something that hit on you really hard. So
it
what was
did.
that?
I went and looked at the artwork, and there was some Nike Air Force Ones that said "fuck banks"
Oh,
on them.
that's so cool.
And I don't cuss. I am not a cusser. But that resonated with me because I thought to myself, wow, there must be other people that are having issues with banks. For me, the
Mhm.
issue was that I severely misunderstood these loan documents. And honestly, like, I've never been taught about money. I mean, yeah, my dad's a CPA, but most of my
Mhm.
childhood he was at work. Like
Mhm.
he didn't teach me about money. He'd probably like to think he did, but he really didn't. He taught me how to be in a debt cycle because I watched my parents, constantly taking out loans and debt, and they were, robbing Peter to pay Paul. So love them to death, but the one thing they taught me was this cycle of debt and
Mhm.
how taking out a loan is normalized, and it shouldn't be normalized. Really, taking out a loan should not be normalized. The only loan I believe in is if you take out a loan against your Bitcoin, because that's probably the only thing. Like if you were to get a mortgage based off your Bitcoin or something like that, I think that's an amazing thing to be able to take a asset that's not going to grow as fast as Bitcoin and not have to sell it. So
Mhm.
that's probably the only loan that I really believe in. But I'm going to tell you how I just started my Bitcoin journey, and I got
Mhm.
served by the marshals. So I was working for the
Uh-huh.
company that was selling Bitcoin miners. And during that time frame, I was going through all the questioning with the bankruptcy court, and
Okay.
they served me. The marshals came and served me after a meeting with the Department of Justice, because in bankruptcy, you can either go to court and there's no creditors there, they discharge it and you move on, or the Department of Justice decides to investigate you. And they decided to investigate me. So there was a series of 8-hour meetings that I had to
Oh.
sit through. And after one of those 8-hour meetings, I got served by the marshals. I just saw those documents and looked at my bankruptcy attorney, and I was like, what do I do? Because I didn't think I committed a crime, you know? And he said, well, I think you need to hire a criminal attorney. And I was like, what?
And when that
At the,
happened, what year was that?
this was August of 2021.
Oh, okay. Well, oh,
22.
okay.
Was it 22 or 21? Oh, it was 21. It was August of 21. Yeah,
Oh,
so I
okay.
had just barely gotten into the Bitcoin, like barely,
Mhm.
started this new job
Mhm.
and got served. And I didn't believe I was going to prison. I found a criminal attorney, and I just I was in the days like, this couldn't happen to me. Like I have 3 kids. There's no way they're going to send me away. Like,
There was
so
denial.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in denial. And when I pled guilty in January 2022, they just kept pushing my case because there were higher priority fraud cases at the time. And
Mhm.
they just kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. And so I didn't get sentenced until November 2024.
Wow. 2 years.
Yeah,
3 years.
pled guilty in January 2022. Did not get sentenced till November. Wait, was it 23? It was November 23. Wait, was it? Oh, this is all messed up. Yes, it was 23. I'm sorry. So it was the beginning of, sorry about that. All the
Don't
years just
worry.
start to run together. So I pled guilty in January 2022. I was not sentenced until November 2023. And that's not usual you usually get sentenced like 6 months after you plead
Wow.
guilty. But I was in limbo for almost 2 years, and I just lived my life like normal. So I ended
Mhm.
up, the Bitcoin mining company that I was working for, it went out of business. Well, it didn't go out of business. So I'm sorry. It did not. Still around to this day. She ended up letting me go because it was the bear market and she really didn't need me anymore. But at that point, I had developed connections in the industry, and I had met suppliers, I met customers, and I
Okay.
started my own company. So took a little bit for me to start my own company because I did choose to work for a couple other people in the meantime, but it was just contract here and there. But it really helped me gain knowledge to start my own business again. So I did start my own business. It was called Not Your Basic ASIC. And we sold, and it was Not Your Basic ASIC because I was one of the few women in mining, and I just don't think that's basic. And nobody honestly knew about the story that I was going through.
True.
Uh, but I met a lot of people in the Bitcoin community. I went to over 15 conferences before I went to prison. And I had to get approval every single time to travel, and they were okay with it. I went to Dubai
Okay.
before I went to prison. Yeah, so I traveled a lot, and I ended up being able to save quite a bit of money that I brought to court for restitution just from selling Bitcoin miners. But
Hmm.
turns out they made a little mistake in their judgment and committal paperwork, and they didn't order me to pay it. So I didn't think I was going to prison, I didn't.
Hmm.
And I was like, how am I going to take care of my family while I'm in prison? Because I
Yeah.
can't run a business.
Yeah.
So I ended up keeping the restitution money, and that's the money that I sent back to my well, he was my ex-husband because we got divorced a month before I went to prison. That's another
Okay.
story. Yeah, but
All
we're back
right.
together
Well.
now. We're back
Ah,
together
that's
now.
cool. Okay.
See,
Okay.
yeah. So we split up. I went to prison. We weren't together, but I, we had gone through a lot together. Like business closing, bankruptcy, autistic child, loss of everything. He went out and had to get a job again. We went from driving a
Yeah.
Mercedes to a old van with 200,000 miles on it that we paid cash for. It was just like a different lifestyle, and so it
Mm.
was a lot of pressure, and it was honestly a really good reality check. And we were even driving the other day in the car, and I look at him and he goes, I am so thankful for this moment. Like, I am so thankful because you're out of prison, like, we're together, like, we're all, our family's back together and it's restored. And I, he said, like, I took for granted you before and how hard you were working. And, he really got to see when I left all the things that I did for our three kids that I didn't have support from him from. So honestly, going to prison was a gift, and that's a really strange thing to say, and it was really tough, and I still have nightmares about being there. But it was not only a gift for me, it was a gift for my whole family because they really saw just how hard I had worked and how much they had relied on me, and honestly, how much I had enabled them, even my parents, because I
Mm.
was no longer there to help. So it was really hard on my kids. Like that was not the gift part. The beautiful part of all of this is my children now know that God gives and he takes away, like I said. And like when we moved out of our 1,200 square foot rental house and then moved into a bigger house now, my daughter walked through it and was like, thank you, God, for this, because we know that like He puts us through things to teach us and to strengthen us. And if we didn't go through these really hard battles, then we wouldn't be as thankful and we wouldn't be able to share our story to help others. And I think that's the most beautiful part of my story. Also, along with Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is such a beautiful tool that money's spiritual. There's so much behind it. There's so much good and evil behind it. And I really believe that Bitcoin can set you free from the government's agenda. And Bitcoin taught me a lot about money. It taught me a lot about debasement of money when I was sitting in prison, which that's a whole nother story. Like, I was reading Bitcoin books in prison. So let's just go back to that.
I
I
was going to
surrendered.
ask you about that.
Yeah.
That
Let's
timing
let's
about
let's
those
start
things.
let's start from the beginning of prison because this is really good.
All right.
So
Go
so
ahead.
I so I surrendered to prison January 2nd, 2024.
All right. Uh-huh.
And my mom and my grandma drove me down to Bryan, Texas, because in Bryan, Texas, there is a prison camp called Bryan Federal Prison Camp.
All right.
And they drove me there. I ate my last meal before I went in. I mailed my laptop and my phone to a friend because I wasn't with my husband at the time. I had just broken up with my boyfriend. I had a
True. Oh
boyfriend,
yeah.
if you want to believe. Yes. I mailed my laptop and my phone to a really good friend of mine.
Yeah.
His name's Tyler. He took care of everything as far as the business because even when I walked in, I didn't have much time from November to January. And when you sell like big orders, a lot of times those orders, like you may sell it in a month and then it ships out like a couple months later. So I had things that I needed for clients to still be followed up on. And Tyler did that for me.
Cuando dejas tus activos digitales en un exchange o en custodia de alguien más, te expones a riesgos de terceros no deseados. A diferencia del sistema bancario tradicional, Bitcoin te permite tomar el control total de tus fondos utilizando tus propias claves privadas. Esto te permite ser soberano y esencialmente tu propio banco. Al tomar el control de tus Bitcoins, puedes evitar riesgos innecesarios de terceros. Almacenar tus Bitcoin en custodia de terceros como los exchanges puede exponerte a ataques de actores malintencionados, gobiernos o estafadores que lo único que quieren es apoderarse de tu dinero. Las billeteras de hardware aumentan la seguridad de tu billetera porque tus claves privadas se almacenan en un dispositivo especializado que no está siempre conectado al Internet. Como te he dicho antes, mantener tus claves almacenadas en un dispositivo en línea puede exponerte a factores adicionales de ataque, por lo que se recomienda usar una billetera de hardware al almacenar grandes cantidades de Bitcoin durante largos periodos de tiempo. Jade es una billetera de hardware no custodial para Bitcoins y Liquid que ofrece opciones de firma simple y firmas múltiples. Yo personalmente lo utilizo para almacenar mis Bitcoins, ya que me siento mucho más seguro manteniendo mis Bitcoins en una billetera fría que en una almacenada, por ejemplo, en mi teléfono. Si estás pensando en adquirir uno para ti, no olvides utilizar el código de descuento de nuestro show, BitCorner Podcast. De esta forma estarás apoyando directamente el show y además obtendrás un 10% de descuento para la compra de tu billetera fría.
Are you understanding the timeline though? I'm hoping.
Yeah, it's okay that you're jumping back and forward. Because I'm just trying to figure it out. But yeah, so you went to prison on January of 2020
Second. Yeah, 4.
second. Okay.
So
2024.
let me
Okay.
just I'll just briefly go over the timeline.
Mm-hmm.
My company, I started my company called Oliver and Olivia in 2014. It went out of business
Uh-huh.
in March 2021. In
Mm-hmm.
July 2021, I got the job um in the Bitcoin mining. It wasn't Bitcoin mining. At the time, it was developing an app for influencers, and then she switched it to Bitcoin mining. She
Mm-hmm.
switched that
Mm-hmm.
in December. In August 2021, I got indicted. So,
Okay.
what indictment means is the marshal served me.
Mm-hmm.
So, also during that time, I was going through bankruptcy court. In December 2021, I decided to dismiss the bankruptcy because I then realized I'm in hot water. I committed a crime, you know? So,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't even know I'd committed a crime. So January 2021, 22, I pled guilty in court.
Okay.
And then January 2020, I also moved to Texas because
Mm-hmm.
we had sold our house in January 2022,
Mm-hmm.
the one that we misspent the money on. So from January to April, I was living in Texas, and April of 2022, I went to Bitcoin 2022.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so then and then in the summertime, I lost my position, my current company.
Uh-huh.
And by the end of 2022, I had started Not Your Basic ASIC.
Uh,
And I ran Not Your Basic ASIC from 2022 all the way till I left November 20 or till I went to court in 2023. So basically that whole like year and a half, I was traveling, I was going to conferences, I was building up my business. I
Doing a
was
normal
also,
life,
yeah,
basically.
normal life. Me and my husband had split, so we were living
Mm-hmm.
in separate houses in the same neighborhood. We were navigating that with the kids. We didn't even think I was going to prison because they kept pushing the court case off, and I had a significant amount of money saved that I was going to pay my restitution.
Mm-hmm.
So by November, I went and got sentenced.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when they sentenced me to 20 months. The judge said, you know,
Sunday
you're
morning.
a really talented individual, and we know that you didn't do this on purpose, but we have to make an example out of you. So,
Wow.
and she then ordered me 20 months in prison and 100 hours of community service when I got out of any organization of my choice.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I was really mad at God. And she even, you know what she even told me? And you can go to church and do religious programs while you're in prison. And I was like, I just was shocked. I was shook. My best friend, I had 3 best friends. They all came, and my parents were there. Like, they were shook. Like, none of us believed that I was going to go to prison because the whole time during sentencing, it really seemed like, you know, I was going to probably just get a slap on the wrist and get some community
Yeah.
service and maybe an ankle monitor. And so, because she talked a lot about my son, and my son and I are like this, like we are super close. So it was really hard on him. And that was my biggest thing. Like, why didn't I just felt like I was so naive and for taking out all the loans. And so anyways, I ended up surrendering to Bryan Federal Prison Camp.
Ah, yeah.
January 2nd, 2024.
Mhm.
And my sentence was 20 months. And when you go in for a federal sentence, you get, what is it, 10 days off your sentence for every 30 days that you're there for the first 6 months, and
Mhm.
15 days off your sentence for the months after 6 months.
All right.
So my sentence was 20 months. I spent 7 months, 25 days in Bryan Federal Prison Camp, and then I went to a halfway house. And the halfway house was in Oklahoma City, and it was mixed with men and women. And the
Mhm.
types of crimes that were there were anything from murdering to drugs to white collar. So
Wow.
it was a great mix. But in prison camp, I was with only women and they were all nonviolent crimes. So people were in there
Okay.
from, trafficking illegals across the border to, conspiracy. There was a lot of conspiracy, a lot of that, where
Mhm.
they didn't actually commit the crime, but they might have like encouraged it, or like they had a text message that,
Oh wow.
yeah, tons of conspiracy, and it's like, how can you like, how is it okay to put someone in prison for conspiracy? I don't know.
Yeah.
Each case is different, but
Wow.
and I mean, there was even a woman in there that was in there for printing money.
For printing money.
For printing money. Now
What?
tell me, our government, our example, prints money all the time. No, I understand why it's wrong. I totally understand why it's wrong.
Obviously.
But you
Yeah.
start to see, like, okay, all these crimes in here are very money motivated, whether it's selling drugs or bringing people across the border, or, there were many times where I was on the track at Camp Bryan talking to a woman about her story and why she ended up in prison. And a lot of times it was because she needed money to file divorce from her abusive husband, or she needed money because she was struggling. There's just so many fiat based crimes. When you look at why people are in prison, a lot of it was money motivated. So
Yeah.
I started to think like there has to be a bigger reason here. So I read a ton of books in prison. And the one that stuck out to me the most was what was it called? The Lords of Easy Money. In the book, The Lords of Easy Money, it talks about all of the loans that the US provided during COVID, and how the United States government basically came up with the money for those loans. And it specifically talked about the Main Street lending loan and how that loan was just printed money. The Federal Reserve just printed it. And I'm sitting in prison, a Bitcoiner at this point, like a hardcore Bitcoiner, like I'm never using the banks again because I'm in prison. And I'm reading all these books where it's like, you got duped, the government is printing money, causing inflation, causing prices to go up, and we're having to take out loans. This is a debt cycle. Like when you have debt, you are in
Mhm.
prison to those banks. Sometimes I believe debt is necessary, and there are certain times where, it's beneficial. It has its purpose. But the way America has groomed us to believe that debt is normal, that we should buy a car with debt, we should put everything on our credit card, is not normal. And I learned that by reading, the Bitcoin Standard. There was a book mailed to me called Thank God for Bitcoin. That one
Yeah,
really
by
hit
Jimmy
close
Sun,
to
I
home.
think, right?
Thank God
I
for
don't know.
Bitcoin? No, it might have been. Maybe. Look it up.
Yeah, I'm doing that.
Yeah, it
Thank God for Bitcoin. Yeah, Jimmy Sun and Gabe Higgins and a couple of more. Yeah.
that book was mailed
Mm.
to me by someone that didn't know me, that had heard about me and my story. Um, and at that point, I was really ashamed. So no one in the Bitcoin community knew that I was going to prison. They just knew that I was taking a little break, but they didn't know why. But it quickly got out that I was in prison. So, which is fine. Everybody embraced me when I came back. Everything was good. But I got mailed that book, and I read that and I highlighted it, and I got six more copies sent into prison and handed it out, because in that book it really talks about money in a different way than people even think about it. It brings the Bible and it takes money, and it goes all the way back to the Bible times of money and the tax collector and debt, and also the purpose of money. Just, I encourage everyone to read it, because it's really, even if you're not a Christian, there were tax collectors, a long time ago, and money was around, and people were bartering with, stones and different things, back then. So just learning about how money began and how it really got corrupted it was a huge game changer for me. Like, money really is corrupted. And
Absolutely.
it's not what it seems. And there's a lot of, spirituality behind it. I also heard this is something a little different, but I heard to be a billionaire in America,
Mm-hmm.
you have to almost sell your soul. Like the elite. I know I'm probably sounding like, a conspiracy theorist right now, but the people that are billionaires in America, like the Rothschilds, all of these
Yeah.
families are involved in some really bad things, and a lot of it's crimes against children. And
Yeah.
so let's be real, like that's not what money should be. But when you
Mm.
idolize money, and it can be evil, it can be really evil. So I believe Bitcoin brings a lot of freedom because you don't have government control over it. Everyone that owns it controls it. So I actually, while I was in prison, I met Elizabeth Holmes and I gave her the book, Thank
From
God for Bitcoin.
Theranos?
From Theranos. Yeah, she's really
Yeah.
sweet.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes, yeah, she's really cool. Yeah, yeah. So I met her and she wrote me a little poem before I left, and it was really nice. The little things in prison, they go a long way. But, ultimately she was in there for a money crime, and now she is losing 9 years of her life. And she has
Mm-hmm.
small children, and it was really hard to see because we would go to visitation and my sentence was very short compared to people that were in there. But to watch a mom with two young children visiting her on the weekend. I had my children visiting me too, and I was really sad. But also, like, I knew that I was getting out in a few months. 7 months,
Yeah.
8 months of your life isn't much compared to 11 years.
But I think her crime it's way
Yes,
worse, right?
yes, her crime was way worse than mine. I agree, it was way worse. But I believe that she really genuinely believed that she had a product that worked. But she had to, I mean, it's just one of those things with money. I can't really
I
speak
get
to
you.
what she did, but I got to see her from a different side than people talk about. And I really do
Mm-hmm.
believe that she believed that she had a product that really worked. And she was really excited and motivated. And sometimes you can talk yourself into believing that something is real that's not, because I talked myself into believing that I wasn't going to prison. And I definitely was going and should have known that the whole time. So I
Yeah.
think the mind is crazy how it works, especially with trauma.
Yeah.
With coping mechanisms, and I think that's why we start making mistakes like she made and like I made. And um but yeah, so prison, I was teaching women about Bitcoin.
That was my next question. That you
Yeah.
were able to
Yeah.
managed to orange pill. Do you orange pill Elizabeth Holmes?
I mean, she already knew what Bitcoin was, but I gave her the
Oh really?
book. So I guess I gave her the book, Thank God for Bitcoin. We need to find the guy that wrote it and tell him that Elizabeth Holmes has a copy of that.
Jimmy's son. I'll tell him.
Yes, please do. Say, hey, I met a woman who went to prison. She gave your, yeah, I bought like 6 copies of that and I gave it out. And that book is still floating around Bryan Federal Prison Camp.
And what did
But
they tell you in general? The ones that you tried to orange pill.
everybody loved it, was so open to it, and was so excited about it. I had a lady who was in prison for tax evasion, and
Mm-hmm.
she had came up to me and said, and she was still running her business because she owned a chain of hotels, and she was like,
Uh-huh.
hey Jill, my assistant just emailed me, we've been having a lot of demand to take Bitcoin at the hotel. Why should we take Bitcoin at the hotels? And I was like, because it's discreet, people want to travel discreetly, it's perfect, you need to take Bitcoin. So I got to talk to her about that. She also owned some Airbnbs, and she came up to me and she was like, oh, we had a tenant at our Airbnb, and the power bill was like $5,000 for the weekend. What do you think happened? And I was like, they were mining Bitcoin in your Airbnb. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Ah, that's
yeah.
true.
Yeah. Another really cool thing is at that point, I wasn't sure, like, when I got out of prison, I knew I was just going to start, like, I was going to sell Bitcoin miners and ASICs again and get back into
Mm-hmm.
that. I didn't know how it was all going to work, but I did have a lady that came up to me and she was like, I just really have a word on my heart from God to tell you. And I was like, okay. She was like, you're going to be, I see you being in a lot of podcasts and sharing your story because it's going to help a lot of people. And I was like, I don't know how that's going to happen, but okay, I'm willing to share it if God wants me to share it. And so that's just been like my passion now, is just any way my story can help people from getting loans that they may not be aware of that have implications, or dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin, and really getting out of the fiat debt cycle.
Yeah.
I
Uh,
think that's super important.
yeah, I also want to ask you before continue because we have an hour,
Yeah.
but I don't know how much time
Yeah.
do you have because I want to give you ask you a couple of questions, but
Yeah.
how much time do
Yeah.
you
Let's do
have?
it.
Okay,
Yeah. So my next call isn't till 11:30, so we're good.
I don't know what time it
So
is there.
28, 20. You got 28 more minutes.
Okay, it's cool. Right. All right, so let's do this. We're gonna start wrap it up in a couple of minutes. I have two questions from my end, but before that, I told you that I think it's the perfect timing to do the quiz. So, guys, you already know how it works. Already explained. Jill, my previous guest, have a question for my next guest, but Jill today have two questions because uh, all right, so I'm gonna tell you. So my previous guest was Ian, that it was right before our call, but also we had an interview with Lawrence Lepard. That's why I brought
Cool.
the big friend. Unfortunately, Ian had a very few short period of time to provide his answer. He gave a powerful answer, but he says that it would implicate to make a whole episode about it. And it's right because it's a very profound question. So I'm gonna pass the question to you as well because we have a little bit more timing. So probably you can give a little bit more insights. And also, two persons are quite different. We came from different perspectives, so probably you will give a different answer about that. And then I will provide you the question that Ian made to you. So, all right, let's go first with the Lawrence because I think that's the deeper one. Ian, thank you very much, and we're gonna make the episode also with Joel.
Okay.
But here's the question from Lawrence. Let me share with you. Yes, sir.
I think the most interesting question that you can ask Bitcoiners is how do they see it unfolding in the next 5 or 10 years? I think we all have different views. I mean, I think Samson thinks we're going to $1 million tomorrow, and I think it's probably going to take 5 to 7 years. And I think everybody has a different perspective on the timeline, and I think I think all Bitcoiners understand that what we're talking about is happening, and it's kind of inevitable. It's kind of baked in the cake. I mean, in the same way that the internet spread, Bitcoin's going to spread. Everybody's going to, in some time frame, we're all going to be Bitcoiners. So I don't think there's much debate about that amongst the hardcore Bitcoiners, but I think there's a lot of debate, and it's healthy debate, and it's interesting to hear people's perspectives on what's the timeline, what are the key events, how does it unfold, and will we ever get to a whole Bitcoin standard? I mean, I strongly believe that my kids, or certainly my grandkids, they'll kind of look at the dollar. It'll be like this antique thing that everybody used to use. And now, things will be priced in Satoshis. In dollar terms, I'm not sure what a Satoshi will be worth, but, a car will have a Satoshi price and a hamburger will have a Satoshi price and everything will be priced in Satoshis. And so I think that's inevitable. But in my lifetime, I don't know. I mean, it could be 40 years from now. I'm not sure, but I think that's where we're going. And I'm always interested when almost everyone I speak to in Bitcoin land, I kind of say, hey, give me your perspective. What do you think the timeline is on this? So I would ask your next guest, I would say, hey, what's your timeline for, full Bitcoin adoption? We're all priced in Satoshis and fiat has failed. And I think that would be a very interesting question.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I think that it's definitely going to be accelerated just because of the tariffs here in America. We're seeing our dollar not being spent as quickly. I don't know if you heard Amazon is going to start putting the price of the tariff
I know.
along with the price of the item when you check out, and that's huge. So I think that's going to actually accelerate. And I don't mean to talk about tariffs and that be a whole different
Yeah.
subject, but that is going to cause inflation in America ultimately on the American people. And so our dollar will not go as far. And I don't know if that's part of Donald Trump's plan is just to crash the US dollar or what, but I do think that it will be accelerated. My timeline of when the mass adoption, definitely in the next 5 to 7 years, like you said. Do I think it's going to hit $1 million soon? I don't actually, because I mean, I really see us in the bull market maybe getting to 250, but it's going to take a little bit of time for more countries to get involved and more money to flow into it. I do believe that we will develop a full strategic reserve because Senator Cynthia Lummis is all about buying 1 million Bitcoin, and I think
Mm.
Donald Trump is for it, and I hope she does it before his term is over. So, like I would say, 4 to 7 years. That's my prediction. I also think that we'll move all of our saving. Like I just save in Bitcoin now, but I think the banks will start to recognize it as a lending asset. So, as far as like being able to go to McDonald's and pay for a hamburger, I don't think we're going to be able to do that. The reason why is because Bitcoin is a little slow, you know? So I think maybe we'll use the Lightning Network, or maybe we'll
Mm-hmm.
use a different coin for everyday purchases. Although I think Bitcoin will be like an asset, like gold. Like, like my grandparents would buy gold bars and put them in the safe. Well, that's what Bitcoin's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that the US dollar will be like to have cash is ancient. We'll be using it on our phone. And I think there will be different coins for utility that we will be paying, but it will be linked to Bitcoin or backed by Bitcoin, or I
All
think
right.
that's my thought. So yeah, I
Cool.
think he's right on track. I definitely think that we're going to be there, and the people that are in it now are very smart. It's not too late. People think it's too late when it's at $100,000. No, it's not too late. Dollar cost average and save it for 5 years, and you
Uh,
won't say that it's too late.
Absolutely. Actually, you know what? That in El Salvador, that's how it works. We don't use the layer one. We use Lightning, and it works smoothly. So that's
There
I
you go.
think.
So that's what I was thinking. The only reason why I said maybe they would use another coin is I know a lot of the banks are like heavily invested in XRP, and I've heard that they might use that as a coin.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? I'm a Bitcoiner. Like I don't do that.
Yeah.
Hopefully we aren't forced.
Yeah, I have interviewed other Bitcoiners that are from the US as well, and I think
Yeah,
what they have shared with me is that probably the government, what they're doing is to collect those shitcoins or whatever that are confiscated, but then
yeah,
when they confiscate it, they will manage somehow to convert it into Bitcoin. So they're gonna
yeah.
sell it to buy more Bitcoin. I think that's how it's going to work. But
That's really good. That's really, really good. That's really good. Yeah. So we'll see what happens, but I'm excited about it.
yeah, exciting times.
Yes, it
Absolutely.
really is. It really is.
Yeah. And now Ian's question. All right, so let's go.
If you could choose a person to orange pill, anyone, anywhere, who would you choose and why? Why would you want to have this person orange pilled? And what are you trying to gain, or what is it you want to receive from them by them being orange pilled? So good luck in answering that. I'll be watching to hear your answer and stay curious.
Yeah, so I'd love to orange pill the judge that sentenced me.
Wow, really?
Yes, I would love to orange pill her because, at the end of the day, she's just a person, but she's also has a lot of influence in the judicial system. So as we start to use Bitcoin and digital assets more, I think it's important that judges and people of power like that know more about Bitcoin and its utilization and what it can do for people, good and bad. So yeah, I would really like to orange pill her. Just tell her what it's about and why, not only just so she can see what it's done in my life. I'm really the use case here. Look at what Bitcoin's done in my life. And I want to show her everything that I do and everywhere I request to travel, and even my probation officers seeing my success. I would love to share with her how I did it. And it's really, truly Bitcoin and
All
that
right.
mindset, and how I've changed from being so fiat minded to Bitcoin minded, and how it really is freedom, and how, money is corrupt. And I think when you start learning more about Bitcoin, you start understanding money, because it forces you to see, a stable currency. You're all of a sudden seeing like a deflationary currency, and you start seeing all the wrongs of the dollar. Even in sentencing of white collar crimes, I think it would be really important for them to know about Bitcoin, because when you learn about Bitcoin, you learn about how awful the United States dollar is and really how broken it is. And then once you really see how broken it is, you start to see why people are so money motivated. And so maybe that would help her understand a person's story more.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Bitcoin has a lot of values behind
yeah,
its core,
yeah,
let's say. Absolutely.
yeah.
Actually, that will be my last question. But before that, I'm just curious about something that probably people that are hearing your story might be thinking about. That first, when do you came out, and second, before you answer that, once you're out, how do you start rebuilding? I mean, in everything, like, because there's that there's the trust in you, the image of you, but also just struggle because you're starting from zero, right? So I think it's a deep question, but if you can share a bit. about that?
Yeah. So before I went to prison, I had a really good reputation in the mining
Okay.
community. It's a very small community. So when I went in and I got out, I had an identity crisis. I was like, wow, everybody knows that I went to prison. So I
Mm-hmm.
thought to myself, I'm going to embrace it and I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are probably people that don't want to do business with me because of what I did, and I
Mm-hmm.
respect that completely. But at the end of the day, like I'm not that person that I was in 2020 and 2021. And I know that wasn't that long ago, but I've been through a lot and I've learned a lot about money.
Mm-hmm.
And I am so regretful of the things that I did and how I spent money the way I did and the people that I hurt and my children and just everything. I'm regretful of it all. And while I do believe prison is a gift. I believe that God can take really broken things and make them beautiful, and that's why prison was a gift. It was hard. Prison was hard. There were days I screamed and cried in my pillow, and I gained 30 pounds because I didn't want to get out of bed because I was depressed. Just
Yeah.
read a lot of books. I mean, it was hard. I like went and watched TV and Bitcoin 2024 was going on and it was in Nashville and Donald Trump was going to be there. And I looked at my roommate and she probably thought I was crazy. And I said, I'm speaking at that conference next year. And I am. So
That's awesome.
yeah. And I'm telling my prison story. So
That's the most powerful thing that you can do.
yes. And so the one thing that I did when I got out of prison was I knew I had to do 100 hours of community service, and I did not wait until I was out of the halfway house. So I
Mm-hmm.
was living in a halfway house, and I was going to go see my kids and my family on the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
So at the halfway house, I um, just started. I didn't start my business until January because um, I couldn't, but what I did do was I started connecting with clients. I started talking to people in the community that I was back. I started, just making phone calls because that's really all I didn't have a computer at the halfway house. So from August to about, what was it, November, I was in the halfway house. And
Okay.
so from that time, I worked for a friend. She ran a business called The Viewing Room, and it was a
Mm-hmm.
baby ultrasound boutique. And so there was some
Okay.
downtime then when I was up there. Yeah, and I would make phone calls, talk to clients, just catching up. There was a lot to catch up about. And so I did that. But while I was in that transformation, that period of time, about 3 months about being in the halfway house, I met a guy named Justin Redrick, and he wrote the book called From Bars to Bitcoin. And what Bars
Mm-hmm.
to Bitcoin, they're the Bitcoin Transformation Community is the name of his nonprofit. The book that he wrote is From Bars to Bitcoin.
Okay.
And I met him, and we did my very first podcast in the halfway house. I wasn't on video or anything, it was just my voice.
Wow.
And we talked about one of the things that I saw in the halfway house was people coming out of prison and having to take minimum wage jobs. And then now there's all the temptations of the world, drugs, alcohol, bad relationships, all these
Yeah.
things. And they were falling back into the same patterns. There wasn't any support. And
Mm-hmm.
I connected Justin Redrick with the halfway house that I was at because I wanted to bring in his books and I also wanted to have him come teach a class.
Hmm.
And the employment specialist was very rude and ignored his emails and denied the request. And
Wow.
what Justin Redrick does is he goes into halfway houses, he goes into prisons, he teaches ASIC repair classes. So when these people get out of prison or they're transitional houses, they can get a job doing ASIC repair and make $20, $25, $30 an hour as a technician versus going to OnQ and getting a job and getting paid $15 an hour and
Yeah,
staying
way
in that
different.
fiat cycle, So it's a beautiful thing that they're doing. And I wanted to partner with it because he mainly does like men prisons and men halfway houses, and I really wanted to bring him in and help women too because women can repair as well. My halfway house shut it down. They completely shut it down, and it just made it very clear to me that the government does not want to rehabilitate felons. They don't. They want them back in prison. So yes, that
Damn.
is why I want the judge that sentenced me to learn about Bitcoin.
That makes sense a lot.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that is my mission is to spread Bitcoin and help as many people as I can to get into the community. I mean, it provides amazing jobs. It provides a lot of things. It provides a lot of solutions to a lot of things that are going on in our country. And I'm a walking example of it. And For me, getting back into it was basically like doing my volunteer work and getting back into the community. I was blessed in that aspect. But while I was in there, introduced women to Bitcoin. And I also, a few of the women I connected with other people that I knew were hiring because my halfway house was not open to just incoming.
Damn it. It's incredible.
In fact, I got in trouble for introducing Justin to my employment specialist. I got in trouble because she said that her email is private and that I should not be sharing her contact information.
Damn it.
Yeah.
That's off.
So I tried. I tried. To the Oklahoma City halfway house, I tried and I got shot down.
Yeah. Well, let's keep pushing.
Yeah, just keep it. Honestly, during that transitional time, my best advice is when getting out of prison and starting over, I just prayed a lot that God would put people in my path, and He does. I just had faith. And every situation, every person that I met during that journey, I just knew God had put them in my life for a reason. And I took it
Yeah.
either as a learning opportunity or, it was really frustrating because I just felt like I couldn't get back to work. I had to wait another few months. I thought when I got out and I got to the halfway house, I would be on home confinement and life would be dandy and I could work and start my business again from home. But that is just not what happened. I was
Absolutely.
delayed.
Yeah.
But delay doesn't mean denial.
Absolutely. Jill, I have a lot of questions, but we need to start wrap it up.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, but first of all, before I make my last question, thank you for sharing your powerful story. There's a
Absolutely.
lot, and I hope that people that listen to your story, not just in the podcast but also in the Bitcoin conference, that probably they will see the value of it because it's a lot. And so
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for coming to the podcast. But my last question is that what is the most beautiful or powerful lesson that you have learned in the Bitcoin space and everything that you have been facing in your life?
That I think the most powerful lesson that I've learned in my Bitcoin journey, like I said, or I've repeated, is that God gives and He takes away. And when He gives, He can give you some really powerful tools. And Bitcoin is one that was given to me. And it was such a beautiful gift. And so going back and looking at everything that I've been through, I can't deny that His hand wasn't on my life because if I didn't go through everything that I went through, I wouldn't have this story to tell you. And hopefully it brings a lot of people in the community and it shines light that the people, the moms that look like me can still go to prison and that there is a lot of risk in taking out loans and government loans. And you have to be extremely careful because the United States government doesn't play favorites. They choose the stay-at-home mom or the working mom or, and they don't care. They send you to prison. And money is powerful and you have to be careful. And that's where I believe Bitcoin is so beautiful is because it's so transparent. So I try to live my life with transparency as well. And that's why I share my story.
That's awesome. Yeah, Bitcoin is uncorruptible money.
Right.
Jill, thank you very much for stopping by the podcast, especially in the middle of the Bitcoin conference in Barcelona, guys.
Yes.
Don't leave because we'll continue with more interviews and you will see more. Probably right now we will jump right into the conference again. But yeah, Jill, thank you very much. And guys, stay tuned. Don't go. Or if you're listening or watching this later, see you next week.